So it's a 2-hour session. I would like you to write on these posters one question that you have in mind to this morning, to give it back to us, and we will put it on the wall and see at the end of the session if we have answered the question, or if we haven't, then we will try to answer it. And if you have new question, then we'll be giving you the word. So do you have any pen or? No? Do you have one question? Okay. De rien. You don't have to if you don't have questions, but since you're here, I'm sure you have plenty of questions. Okay. Maybe you will have after. Okay. You don't have to. So if you have a question, you give me back the questions, and then I will put it on the wall.
Also, the questions might come up.
Yeah, the question might come up as well. Did you get a poster?
I have one.
You have one. Okay.
Look how many Eleusis has.
Many you have? Did you have? You need one. If you wish. Okay. So I will pick it up the posters in a few minutes. The goal of the session is to answer 3 questions. The first question is, what kind of structure do we need to help an artist that has to deal with administration issues of communication issues or production issues? As well, the second question is what form this structure should have or could have. And the third one is what would be the operating condition. So I think that the first question that we should ask ourselves, it is what is it, a friendly environment? What is a friendly environment? Because for me, it's maybe something, for you, it's maybe something else. So I will ask you first, for you, what is a friendly production? Irini.
I was listening.
What is it?
Hello. I think a friendly production sits in an environment that is made of cooperation, of artists cooperating with each other, artists cooperating with cultural management, artists that work with each other. I'm trying to...
Thank you for passing the torch. Well, I guess reliability is a very important aspect, of course, and stating things clearly beforehand, which means a lot of things.
For me, kind of friendly would be to respond to different needs. So in this way, kind of supportive. Doesn't work. It does, okay. Yeah, so I would think of it more as yeah, kind of caring and supporting environment that kind of allows things to grow in the way they want to grow. So more of kind of, yeah, supportive.
And for me, as a cultural manager, it has 2 different points. One has to do with how we're working with the artists, so trying to be friendly to the artists would mean to giving them the tools that we have that could help them focus only on their art and not having to do administrative work or communication work that can sometimes distract them or make it harder. But also for us as a manager, creating the proper, let's say, legal and financial conditions so that we can operate in a friendly way for us, so that we are sustainable and we can help artists be sustainable also.
Okay, so I may pick up the question you have. So, you haven't got the question? Nobody has a question? Then we can put it on the wall. Eleni has a question. No, she doesn't. It's one question, one poster. Yes.
But maybe it's for later.
Yes. We will see it afterwards. Somebody has posters? No? Okay. So we will see. So maybe we're gonna have each of you will introduce yourself and introduce your what is the experience you have with this subject. So who wants to start? Maybe you should start.
I think I will go last because
Okay.
mine is a bit more general and
Okay.
have specific examples.
So you want to start?
Okay.
Of course I can. No, just for a second. See how we're helping.
Friendly.
In a friendly and reliable way, thank you. So it's a pleasure for me to be here among you today and to be in the position to share some of my thoughts concerning artistic practice in the independent field. So I work in the theatre. My name is Aspasia Maria Alexiou. I work in the theatre in two capacities, mainly, as actress and assistant director. I am part of a theatre company called Kursk, and I've also co-created two performances, acted in them, and basically did everything else needed. I think this information is enough for you to grasp my perspective, as I'm not here to introduce my work in general. So I also think that I have already stumbled upon a notion that has shaped my personal practice. Need. To do as needed. To do what needs to be done. And of course, practicing art out of a need that will most probably never be fulfilled. But what happens to a person's other needs? Throughout the last years, the biggest constant in my income has been my family's paychecks. Valuable and heavily needed indeed, but definitely not helping me answer a vital question. Does society need me? As a person, as one of its members, and least of all, or most of all, as a theatre worker. And if society does need me, and people like me, meaning, among other things, artists that are not generally known, does it assist me, us, in fulfilling the basic needs that can support and sustain our artistic practice? So these are some questions that I have. This year, my theatre company will, it's not mine, but anyway, will be staging a production that received state funding from the Ministry of Culture and Sports. Pleased as I am to be placed temporarily in a less precarious position, I must also mention that I could write a long article on my experiences after having to create a non-profit organization, which is an apparatus eligible, αστική μη κερδοσκοπική, an apparatus eligible for state or private funding, and also after having, I continue. After having to hand in a series of applications and all sorts of certificates to the ministry. This work needed to be done. But could it be done in a different way? I doubt whether non-profit organizations are flexible enough to support a variety of different artistic practices. And I do think that they add up to a bureaucratic overload. Also, apart from my new profound understanding of Franz Kafka's work and a feeling of solidarity with other colleagues that were kind enough to answer my questions or simply share their distress with me, I must say that I often wondered whether, am I supposed to be doing this right now? Apart from the fact that it needs to be done, do I need to do it? And I'm not asking as a child that wants to avoid a household chore, but I'm just saying, aren't there professionals out there equipped to do this so that I could do my own job? At the time of the first application, hiring a production manager, which seems to be the professional suitable for this job, seemed premature. I remind you that we hadn't received the funding yet. But I also think that this decision could have something to do with the concept of trust. I think one of the biggest commonplaces among theatre artists is that producers, either as employers or as associates,
should be held under close examination, or else something shady is going to happen. I obviously cannot attest to the validity of such a generalized claim, but I think it's worth mentioning because it's capturing a certain mind frame. Furthermore, it completes the portrait of many artists that are oscillating between insufficient public funds or other means of support, because financial support is not the only support that the state can provide. And they oscillate between that and potentially traumatizing interactions with the private sector. At this point, I'd like to stress the importance of signed agreements, formal hirings, of all the official documents, that is, that establish and protect a working relationship. To solve this conundrum, many artists choose to handle everything themselves. From my experience, and from what I've learned observing other people's practices, this decision comes at a high cost. Although it provides one with the illusion of full control, both artistic and administrative, it ultimately results in frustration. The time and effort needed for the organizational aspect are bound to affect the creative aspect, and vice versa. The extent of this might not be evident in small productions, but it becomes apparent when a young director or a small company assume a bigger assignment. In that case, the lack of infrastructure can really take its toll. So I don't wish to exhaust the available time, but I'll happily answer your questions, of course. And one last point with which I'd like to conclude for now is I was thinking, daydreaming rather, what if there was a genie that would grant me a few wishes? And I personally would wish for reliable advice on funding from organizations, public or private, other than the Greek state, for advice on how to present your work in international events, and for groups of professionals, that don't necessarily create a new piece each year or two pieces each year, so as to need a permanent associate and to be able to cover his or hers also permanent salary. I think that an advisory or consulting service would be really useful. If this exists somewhere here in Athens or here in Elefsina, please let me know, because up to this point I've relied on the kindness of my colleagues, but I could use with some extra help. Thank you.
Thank you. So maybe it's a good time for you to explain what you're doing and to show your PowerPoint.
Maybe the others also, because they are also artists.
So you want, okay. Irini, you want to talk?
Yes. Hello. I am Irini Linardaki. I'm a visual artist. I lived for about 20 years in France. I worked in Marseille and Paris, and now I live in Iraklio, Crete. And I work mainly in New York and France, a little bit, very rarely in Athens. In Marseille, which was a city that was not very well organized in regard of artistic production, especially in the experimental field and in the young artist field, we had to cooperate with each other. As artists, we needed to work together because we needed to create spaces to work together. And I think the idea of space is very important, because in France, space is very expensive as opposed to Greece. And the need for having space made us work in spaces all together. So to get other artists and to create an environment that was similar to being in the art school. And to work close to each other, and in many ways to cooperate with each other also for projects. So I put on photos in lots of cooperative projects that I have organized. And when I came to Greece, I saw that people didn't have this need for space, at least in Irakli where I live, because everybody has space, from their family, from somebody they know, they all have a studio. And they don't need to do this. They don't have the drive to cooperate because they can just work each one in his own space. And in my work, in the places where I work, like in New York, people have to cooperate because space is very expensive. And a lot of the artists I know are older, and they worked in the 80s, for example, in New York. And first, nobody wanted to be inside Manhattan in the 80s because it was so scary. And there were lots of empty spaces, and a lot of projects started because of that, because people were around each other, and all this energy passed from one to the other. So I think this is important, and this is, and like young British artists, they were in lofts far away from London, yet people went all the way there to see them. So I think cooperation is important in Greece. I only know Crete. I don't pretend to know Athens. On the other hand, in Crete, one thing we don't have is art management. So very often, as artists, we have to take the role of the people who organize as well, who convince the city to give us space, money, and we also try to convince them that, you know, there is a future in arts and not only the past, okay? So I am mainly an artist. It takes a lot of energy to organize, as the people here know. And I want to ask, who of you are artists? And who are in the cultural management? And who do both? You see, so it exists, right? We are here. There are people inside, and we're not that many. Okay, and you can understand the challenges, right? And what we were talking with Muriel on the bus coming here was every time I found myself in organizing a project, like now we're organizing a project for 2020 in the Bronx, and as soon as I talk to the artists who I called to come in the project, they're like, okay, how much money do we have? And I'm like, wait, I'm one of the artists. I'm not. Immediately, I take the role of the organizer, so they're like, okay, we want money, we want plane tickets. We're like, no, we have to work together. And as soon as the idea of work together comes in, it's a little bit more difficult, okay? Because if you say to people, okay, let's write this together, let's get, and very often to organize things in Crete, I have to sit around lots of artists and convince them, really convince them to cooperate. Because they are good artists, and they have to. And when we want to bring artists from Athens, I always ask advice from people in Athens to bring people to Crete. And it's funny, because you have to convince everyone. You have to talk to the city to convince them. You have to talk to the artists to convince them, you know? So, and in what regards the artistic production, I think the idea of networking is important. We talked a lot about it yesterday also. Cooperation that I spoke about, creating spaces, okay? And this is for us to do it. Nobody will do it for us. It exists sometimes. You know, you have artist studios sometimes. We don't have them in Crete. It's better that we make them and we live in them as artists. And then there is the idea of responsibility, which comes in the organization. It comes in many ways. And there is a phrase saying, with dreams come responsibility, okay? And I think we can all, everybody who's in the artistic production can imagine why. And I think every artist and everybody who is in the cultural management has responsibilities, but to who? And what are the responsibilities? And what is the difference between responsibility and duty? Do we have duties? You know, I think we have responsibilities. And I think for every person, the sense of responsibility is important. Somebody who creates has immediately a responsibility. To who? To the city, to the community, to his own work. Is it a personal responsibility? Is it a civic responsibility? You know? I think these are questions that we can discuss with everyone, because everybody has a very different sense of that. But it goes with artistic production. I don't think there is anybody who creates and leaves it in his little studio and then forgets about it. We all have. And then some are more engaged. Yesterday we were talking about communicating or about being socially engaged and all that. I believe artists have one role, being artists, okay? It's not artist/activist, it's not artist/, it's artist. And everything goes in it, and we all have a different sense of what has to go in there. And this is okay, we're all different. But, you know, like, I put a lot of projects there that had us either cooperate with the community very often, or be in, how do you say, en clash? You know, find, yeah, like in contradiction with people who, yes. And also in Iraklio, very often one discussion we have is about, especially contemporary artists who live in Iraklio, who don't necessarily show their work a lot in Iraklio, believe they're a little bit, not all of them, but some are snob. They believe that the public of Iraklio is not, the audience is not, doesn't have, cannot have access to their work because they cannot understand it or things like this. And you have to tell them that the tool is their art, is not something else, you know? And this is part of the responsibility thing. I think that's enough, and that it's better that we interact.
So maybe.
Okay. Εγώ θα μιλήσω στα ελληνικά. Απλώς να περιμένουμε λίγο να μπει και η παρουσίαση. Θα το δείξω. Ναι. Αγγελική Ζερβού ονομάζομαι εγώ. Ένα λεπτάκι. Ωραία. Εγώ λοιπόν εκπροσωπώ ουσιαστικά την εταιρεία Μεδιανέρας. Ναι, θέλουμε και το αυτό. Ευχαριστώ. Η οποία είναι μια εταιρεία πολιτιστικής διαχείρισης βασικά και επικοινωνίας που ιδρύθηκε το 2014 από ανθρώπους προερχόμενους από διαφορετικές επαγγελματικές και γνωστικές αφετηρίες. Δηλαδή τα background μας είναι στην αρχιτεκτονική, την πολιτιστική διαχείριση, τη δημοσιογραφία και τη δημιουργική γραφή και το copywriting, λίγο πιο σε διαφημιστικές εταιρείες. Δηλαδή, με στόχο να προσφέρουμε προγράμματα ολοκληρωμένα για πολιτιστικά προϊόντα και έργα. Το όνομά μας, εντάξει, το δανειστήκαμε από την ισπανική λέξη Μεδιανέρας, που σημαίνει μεσοτυχίες, έτσι, με μια επιθυμία να κάνουμε τον ενδιάμεσο, κατά κάποιο τρόπο, μεταξύ των καλλιτεχνών και των κοινών, μεταξύ της ιδέας και της επικοινωνίας αυτής και όλου αυτού του δικτύου. Η δουλειά μας βασίζεται σε αυτά στα 3 C, όπως λέμε εμείς, τα concept, δηλαδή την δημιουργία αφηγήσεων, ιδεών για πολιτιστικές δράσεις και προϊόντα, την επιμέλεια, αλλά και την επικοινωνία με ολοκληρωμένα προγράμματα επικοινωνίας για πάλι πολιτιστικά προϊόντα και έργα. Συνοπτικά, οι υπηρεσίες είναι διοργάνωση παραγωγή πολιτιστικών εκδηλώσεων, διαμόρφωση πολιτιστικής πολιτικής, project management, επιμέλειες έργων τέχνης, επικοινωνιακές στρατηγικές και προγράμματα και χορηγικά έχουμε κάνει. Πολύ συνοπτικά τώρα για να μην σας ζαλίσω δηλαδή με αυτά. Και έχουμε από το 2014 μέχρι τώρα δουλέψει σε έργα που κυρίως έχουμε ασχοληθεί με την επιμέλεια, με την επικοινωνία, είτε καμπάνιες, είτε πιο στρατηγικά προγράμματα δηλαδή επικοινωνίας, και project management και παραγωγή εκθέσεων και μεγαλύτερης κλίμακας εικαστικών εγκαταστάσεων, σε συνεργασία με αρκετούς και διαφορετικούς πολιτιστικούς οργανισμούς και εταιρείες. Εδώ τώρα επέλεξα λίγο να σας μιλήσω λίγο πιο συγκεκριμένα για κάποια από τα project μας, για να καταλάβετε λίγο περισσότερο το εύρος, αλλά και αυτά που κάναμε. Αυτό ουσιαστικά ήταν η πρώτη μας δουλειά, που ήταν η έκθεση ατομική του Γεωργίου Χερουβίμ, ένας νεαρός καλλιτέχνης, δραστηριοποιείται στην Ελλάδα και στο εξωτερικό. Και η έκθεση αυτή, την οποία κάναμε και επιμέλεια και επικοινωνία και παραγωγή, έτυχε να πραγματοποιηθεί και στο χώρο που είναι το γραφείο μας, ένα παλιό κτίριο στην Πανεπιστημίου. Έτσι, σε μια προσπάθεια να δώσουμε και μια διαφορετική χρήση σε αυτό το κτίριο που ήταν παρατημένο πάρα πολλά χρόνια και όμορφο. Με ένα ιδιότυπο δηλαδή καθεστώς, μπορέσαμε να χρησιμοποιήσουμε και έναν από τους κοινόχρηστους χώρους για να γίνει η έκθεση αυτή. Στη συνέχεια ασχοληθήκαμε με την παραγωγή και την επικοινωνία του έργου της Ελένης Πανουκλιά, που είναι και μαζί μας σήμερα εδώ για τα Εσχήλια το 2016. Και προχωράω λίγο εδώ, και καθώς και για τις προηγούμενες χρονιάς, της Δανάη Στράτου, πάλι την εγκατάσταση στα Ισχύλια. Αλλά και μία από τις μεγαλύτερες δουλειές που κάναμε, έτσι, και τις πιο ολοκληρωμένες, όπου ουσιαστικά χρησιμοποίησαμε μάλλον όλο το φάσμα των υπηρεσιών μας, ήταν η έκθεση GRA της «Η Ελλάδα το 80 στην Τεχνόπολη», στο πλαίσιο της οποίας κάναμε όλο το πακέτο που είχε να κάνει με project management και οργάνωση παραγωγής, τη στρατηγική επικοινωνίας, τη χορηγική καμπάνια και το πρόγραμμα του εθελοντισμού, πάντα σε συνεργασία με την Τεχνόπολη του Δήμου Αθηναίων, φυσικά. Έτσι, αυτά λίγο συνοπτικά. Μετά, προσπαθώντας και εγώ να απαντήσω σε αυτή την ερώτηση του τι σημαίνει φιλικό περιβάλλον, ως προς τον καλλιτέχνη, για μας το φιλικό περιβάλλον έχει να κάνει με το ότι μπορούμε να προσφέρουμε υπηρεσίες που θα το κάνουν λίγο πιο φιλικό για τον καλλιτέχνη, δηλαδή μπορούμε να διαχειριστούμε σε μεγάλο βαθμό, δεν θα πω σε απόλυτο βαθμό, γιατί ναι, αυτά που έθεσες πριν, οι Ασπασίες, ουσιαστικά έχουν να κάνουν και με νομικά και οικονομικά ζητήματα, που και εμείς έχουμε κενά εκεί και προσπαθούμε και εμείς να μάθουμε και να δούμε ποιο είναι το καλύτερο από όλα αυτά. Πάντως, σίγουρα μπορούμε και κάνουμε μεγάλο κομμάτι οργανωτικών συντημάτων παραγωγής και επικοινωνιακών θεμάτων, που μπορούν να πλαισιώσουν έτσι ένα καλλιτεχνικό έργο και να πάρουν κάποια πράγματα από τα χέρια του καλλιτέχνη του ίδιου. Και θεωρούμε ότι προσφέρουμε και μια επίσης φιλική προσέγγιση, ίσως σε σχέση με τις εταιρείες παραγωγής, διότι λόγω και των δικών μας background έχουμε έτσι γνώση της δημιουργικής διαδικασίας από μέσα, και νομίζω ότι μπορεί αυτό να προσφέρει μια περισσότερη κατανόηση και μια περισσότερη ευαισθησία στον τρόπο που προσεγγίζουμε τον καλλιτεχνικό έργο και τον καλλιτέχνη, που μπορεί κάποιες φορές να λείπει από μια διαφημιστική εταιρεία, ας πούμε, ή μια εταιρεία παραγωγής που ίσως, δεν λέω και ότι είναι απαραίτητο πάντα αυτό, σκέφτεται με διαφορετικό γνώμονα ή δεν γνωρίζει τη διαδικασία έτσι τόσο πολύ από μέσα. Όμως, και για μας, το περιβάλλον δεν ξέρω αν είναι και τόσο φιλικό, και πάλι εκεί θα κάνω focus κυρίως στα νομικά και τα οικονομικά, γιατί εμείς όταν θέλαμε να ιδρύσουμε την εταιρεία είχαμε μεγάλο προβληματισμό στο τι είδους εταιρεία πρέπει να κάνουμε. Εν τέλει, ιδρύσαμε μια όμικρον ε, η οποία σε σχέση με τις μη κερδοσκοπικές είναι κερδοσκοπική, οπότε έχει σκοπό να μοιραστούν τα κέρδη μεταξύ των εταίρων, το οποίο δεν γίνεται ακριβώς έτσι στη μη κερδοσκοπική, αλλά ταυτόχρονα μας αποκλείει και από κάποια προγράμματα και χρηματοδοτήσεις και επιχορηγήσεις που δεν μπορούμε να πάρουμε γιατί δεν είμαστε μη κερδοσκοπικοί. Τότε είχαμε επίσης διαρωτηθεί αν θα έπρεπε να ιδρύσουμε ή ΚΙΝΣΕΠ, αλλά ειδικά την περίοδο που ξεκινήσαμε και οι ίδιοι λογιστές μας απέτρεπαν από αυτά, γιατί και οι ίδιοι δεν γνώρισαν καλά να διαχειριστούν τα λογιστικά τους, απαιτούσαν περισσότερη δυσκολία ή ήταν πιο ακριβή η λογιστική διαχείριση των βιβλίων αυτών των εταιριών. Συν το ότι ήταν ακόμα το 2014 πιο νέες μορφές εταιρείες, άλλαζαν συνέχεια οι κανονισμοί λειτουργίας από το κράτος και η φορολόγηση και όλα αυτά τα πράγματα. Και υπήρχε ένα πλαίσιο που ήταν κάπως δεν ξέρω, περίεργο, οπότε μας επέτρεπαν. Καταλήγοντας όμως στην όμικρον ε, έχουμε να διαχειριστούμε ένα φόρο που είναι στο 29%, μία προκαταβολή φόρου που κάθε χρόνο αυξάνεται φτάνοντας στο 100%, ένα τέλος επιτιδεύματος στα 1.000 ευρώ, επειδή η έδρα μας είναι στην Αθήνα και είναι πόλη πάνω των 200.000 κατοίκων, ΦΠΑ φυσικά, καταλήγοντας όλα αυτά να μας αφαιρούν περίπου 60 με 70% του συνολικού κέρδους από οποιαδήποτε δουλειά κάνουμε. Άρα είναι λίγο δύσκολο. Επίσης, για αυτούς τους λόγους, επειδή έχουμε αυτή τη μορφή και επειδή πρέπει να καλυφθούν όλα αυτά τα πράγματα, πρέπει φυσικά να έχουμε, γιατί μπορεί να ακούγεται περίεργο τώρα για τους ξένους αυτό, νόμιμες συνεργασίες οπωσδήποτε, δηλαδή να μπορούμε οι συνεργάτες μας και οι άνθρωποι που δουλεύουν μαζί τους να εκδώσουν παραστατικά, τιμολόγια, αποδείξεις. Αυτό μπορεί να οδηγήσει σε κάποια υπερτιμολόγηση, που δεν ξέρω αν είναι υπερτιμολόγηση, αν πρέπει οι υπηρεσίες να καλύψουν και τα φορολογικά τις υποχρεώσεις της εταιρείας. Είναι όμως όλο αυτό μαζί συχνά απαγορευτικό για τον ανεξάρτητο χώρο, όπου αφενός τα budget είναι μικρότερα, αφετέρου γενικά ο κόσμος έχει συνηθίσει να δουλεύει μαύρα, ας πούμε, εκ της ανάγκης ή εκ της πρακτικής και άρα συχνά όλο αυτό το πακέτο είναι απαγορευτικό για αυτό τον ανεξάρτητο χώρο. Όμως, για να μπορέσουμε να είμαστε και βιώσιμοι, άρα να μπορούμε να συνάψουμε και μεγαλύτερες συνεργασίες, μιλώντας για μεγαλύτερα budget και μεγαλύτερα κέρδη με άλλους φορείς ιδιωτικού ή δημόσιου φορέα, πρέπει να υπάρχει μια νομική μορφή που να το επιτρέπει αυτό. Πάλι βέβαια πέφτουμε στη σύγκριση ΜΚΟ, μη κερδοσκοπική ή κερδοσκοπική, γιατί και εκεί υπάρχει αυτό το μπαλάκι. Αλλά και στις συμβάσεις που υπογράφονται πάλι και ακόμα και με τους δημόσιους φορείς, και εκεί υπάρχουν πολλές φορές δυσμενείς όροι και για μικρές εταιρείες, ας πούμε, εγγυητικές επιστολές και διάφορα τέτοια που ζητούνται, τα οποία είναι δύσκολο να καλύπτονται, για να οδηγήσουν τώρα και εμένα στο τέλος να αναρωτιόμαστε αν μπορούμε να έχουμε βιώσιμες εταιρείες που κάνουν καλλιτεχνική και πολιτιστική διαχείριση και πώς αυτές θα βιοποριστούν μέσα στο μη φιλικό οικονομικό και νομικό πλαίσιο της Ελλάδας τουλάχιστον. Αν θα μπορούσε δηλαδή να υπάρξει ένα άλλο πλαίσιο και ένα άλλο καθεστώς που θα διευκόλυνε μικρότερες εταιρείες ή εταιρείες στον χώρο του πολιτισμού.
Thank you. We'll wait.
And hopefully we'll get to somehow kind of thoughts around the idea of the friendly space and structures around that. But I'm going to start a bit more on like trying to think what is independent space and why is it important, and why do we need to think of kind of ways of supporting it. So independent space, I would define it as this kind of dynamic field which doesn't belong to state institutions or doesn't belong to private institutions, but is something kind of that is actually constantly improvising and find ways to exist within responding to a series of structures. And that structures might be like artistic, it can be social, it can be political. And I'd say that this kind of idea of like this form of improvising, there is a lot that we can think through and value in this idea of these kind of groups or artists or cultural workers, that they're trying constantly to find ways to improvise with a friendly or unfriendly environment. And there is something that we need to learn or actually need to observe in these ways of interacting. In how, for example, a small group finds a way to make a performance, or how an artist find ways to cooperate with other artists. And on some ways, I would say before we go to creative solutions, I think we need to actually observe this mode of relation. Because the solution is not always one single one, okay, let's solve this problem. So it's also about saying, okay, there is something in this difficulty that defines something about how things are structured within a specific milieu, within a specific here and now. And I think in this, Greece has a very interesting example. So, and that goes quite some time ago. So if, for example, we look at the landscape of Greece around 2000, like it was a much more, I would say, closed and old-fashioned landscape. We would have very clearly like theater owners and theaters. We would have music venues, we would have some galleries that were more private. We have some structural funding from the state that was going towards dance and theater, but more or less following forms of 1980s. So more or less kind of assuming that all theater groups have a theater, for example. So it's actually responding to something. And at this moment, we had, for example, in Greece, we had, especially in the centers, I'm afraid, at the time, but it's also interesting to see why the conditions were there like that. We had this kind of burst of young groups, in a little bit in a way that kind of Aspasia was describing before, trying to really think, okay, what do we do? How do we work differently? Because this system cannot really include us. So it's an unfriendly system. We cannot not enter this institution, cannot enter these theaters because they have these specific modes of production. So how can we create an alternative model? And I think that's something really interesting for us to think today. How can we actually think not only like small solutions, but an alternative system of production? And that's something definitely that needs to be collective, it needs to be cooperative, and it needs to be discussed between also people working in arts management and artists in order to be something different. So at the time, and I'll stop this kind of long review, historical review, what happens is that at the time, people just start really improvising with, for example, forms, because none of us knows what form you need to use. Like now we all say μη κερδοσκοπική, which is a non-profit organization, and at the time, not even that was for granted. So everyone's kind of saying, okay, how can we do this? Okay, how do we find the theater, or how do we find the space, or how do we get money? And that was not really collective, but it was lots of groups working collectively across different fields. And in this way, I would say these groups kind of occupied, not illegally, legally, the peripheries of the system. So in some ways we had like these theaters or these institutions, and then a series of other kind of little kind of fragments happening here and there. And in some ways they actually worked through the difficulties of production, which was inseparable from artistic creation. So in some ways, finding creative solutions for production issues, finding creative solutions for like, creating a DIY network of distribution, of promotion, of like really rethinking those things that they were given because they couldn't access, they couldn't have a TV advertisement, for example, so they need to find, and that produced a different audience, which I think is really something interesting to think of. It's like, how do we produce also, through actually having a different approach, a different audience? And I think what happened was that the theater audience might follow the media that they were at the time quite dominant and go to traditional, for example, venues and art exhibition, but also there was another kind of audience and another kind of mode of production which started like really circulating. And that, of course, you know, in the landscape we see now was a little bit influenced by that. Then we had, of course, what we call polychorus, so we had the Athens Festival changing its form and going to other forms, and that what at the time seemed to be in the peripheries, of course, became, as always, more mainstream and took the other spaces and so on. And what happens later is because the state, in some ways, fails to follow this, and fails, not only the state, but also not other forms happen to support this, we just have a multiplicity of that, and a little bit what we have now. We have a multiplicity of this one model. So, for example, from in 2000 having no companies, 0, maybe 10, 20, I think at some point in 2006 or 7, there were like in 1 year, I think there was one article around that, 300 registration in tax office. So suddenly this becomes a new form that everyone follows, and it's a way to do things. So it enables something as well at the time. But now we're in a different moment where actually we have so much of that and we're trying to solve it somehow. So I guess what I would say is that this independent space is something that's very vulnerable, and it's something that we really need to think through because it has an ecology, and it's something that if we don't, then it does follow the rules of the market. And it will always be not how to say, not powerful enough in front of the market, no matter what mechanisms we can think, because those mechanisms won't be strong enough as, you know, the market mechanisms. So I would say that perhaps my proposal towards thinking the idea of the friendly environment would be like, okay, like we connect like the artistic creation with creativity, with something innovative, with new ideas, with something, but on the other hand, we connect organization with just management. And the thing is, how do we start seeing those things differently? How do we actually like really think the relationship of like artistic production with organization, with management? What do we actually produce there? What kind of new relations can we think? And how can we think like the management as something that's kind of really totally creative? And it's like, what kind of new forms can we see there and new relations? And I would say in order to really think of a friendly environment for the independent space, we first of all need to think of a network around it, of a network of things being shared, and a little bit like questions that Spasia kind of proposed earlier. They can, in some ways, it can only be solved collectively. It can only be solved through structures that they bring together producers, they bring together artists, and they really think new ways for old problems. Otherwise, we actually just trying to find a small little punch in a kind of broken landscape. So, yeah, I would stop here.
Thank you. Okay, you have a question? Okay, maybe you have to get the microphone.
Thank you. Hi, thank you. I'm really enjoying this conversation. So my name's Clemeni. I work in the UK and I run a production company, a visual arts production company that we started as artists 25 years ago because we had nothing to support us. So a lot of what you're saying I understand. I'm very interested, Irini, in this question of responsibility, and particularly in the context of Eleusis 2021, in a city that doesn't have, from my understanding, a huge community of artists who own and live in this space. And in trying to develop this capital of culture, there are going to be artists coming to this city. So the notion of responsibility in terms of the local communities as an artist is something which is perhaps even more complicated here than it is in New York, in Marseille, in Athens. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about this notion of the responsibility and whose job it is to have that responsibility in the specific context of this small city.
So what do you think is the responsibility of the artist?
I can tell you what I think. Well, very briefly then. Okay, so I understand the division between the notion of the artist, but I also understand the responsibility that we have for the communities in which the art takes place. Is this the job of the artist to do community development work? I would argue perhaps not, but it is somebody's job to make sure that when the work is not that it arrives, the idea that it just lands, but that it is developed in the context of the place in which it is going to be shown.
And I think there are other people who are more, would be more interesting to hear about this. How is, for example, in the artistic production, how is creating a site-specific installation for a place that doesn't have an audience in contemporary art, how is this incorporated in the responsibility of the artist? Like, do you just bring an artwork and you parachute it in a space, or do you create in the space?
I mean, I don't know if I can immediately answer that, but I would think that the issue of responsibilities is something really kind of important also for the artist. And the artist has a kind of, it's a position to a specific here and now, and the way to position that, it's of course with the way the artwork, the content of the artwork, but also in the form of relations that it produces. And it's also in the form of organization and how this is situated. It's a series of kind of relations that they need to be thought through. It's not about, you know, suddenly finding some experts that they just do that. It's about really thinking those relations. And that's a matter of responsibility. And you can do it collectively or cooperate with other kind of culture people that are more capable in those issues. But that doesn't mean that we suddenly allocate that in the same way we allocate politics to politicians. You know, it is something that is, it's part of our responsibility. Otherwise, why do it?
I think that in the case of Elefsina, there were resident artists, Eleni, and I think that is a way to incorporate, and maybe Eleni can tell us more about that.
Yes. I don't know if... You hear me? Okay. I don't know if I have any answers. I have many questions, and all of them are related to what you're saying. So in the case of Initiator, which was an artist in residence program that took place in Elefsina for 1 month, and we had this discussion with Muriel Piquet yesterday and other people that are both artists and organizers of residencies. My main question, which I'm still struggling to find the answer, is how organically we involve people in the process without instrumentalizing the artist. And I think maybe an answer is that it happened organically, because when you are doing an artwork, you are not doing it alone. So most of the visual artists don't have necessarily the practical skills to realize their ideas. And even if they have them, we don't have the infrastructure for them to realize it. So since the beginning, we encouraged them to meet people and work in local workshops. Some of them were very independent and did them all alone. We had the case of Hortense Le Calvez, who is doing mostly underwater installations. And she found the fisherman, the carpenter, the people from the maritime organization, and everybody got involved. They came to the walk that we did the first day of the opening. There are other people that were not so open, let's say, because some of them, they had the technical skills to do it, especially Greek artists, because I feel that in the fine arts department in Greece, artists lack the discourse, the way to talk about their work, but they don't lack technical capacities. So for them, it came from us. It still needs work, but we did something we call blind date. So a citizen took for a walk an artist, their favorite walk. Some of them were really confident, especially maybe older people, a little bit older, and men, that took them to their own preferred walk and talked about what they are concerned. There were some younger people who are very motivated that tried more to convince them or promote, or at least the artist felt this way, Eleusis and what we are doing. So they didn't share something very personal. So I feel that also the citizens have to be in this process and be confident, like the artist has a reality and they have their own. The main point is how we connect this. So yes, organically you can do that, but as an organizer you have the responsibility also to create it or provoke it and then care for it. And this is not easy. Because one of my questions is what, I think I have it here. Okay, one thing is to convince the artist to come to work for you. And you say to them that I give you time, I give you space, I give you money, I give you resources, which are never enough. Because people think that you have a big organization and you can provide everything. But behind this big organization is just me, and I'm a very little person in many ways. So how you convince citizens and municipality to work with you? And it's a provocative question, but how you can convince them that you deserve to be paid for what you do, that you deserve to be financed? What do you offer to them? And this is a continuous struggle to do so. And I have the luck not to be the one trying to convince them in front of the municipality. It's the artistic director. But as a woman as well, it's too much to care for. And I can speak as an organization, as a system, in a way, because that's how artists see me. They see a machine somehow that has all the possibilities to take care of them. But also, as I have a non-profit structure, which is registered in France, and it's an artistic structure, but we have all the time collaborative works. So from one side, I'm trying to, provide more for me and my partners, who are artists in this case. But also, when we invite other people, we have the responsibility. And we are lucky to be financed by some institutions. And they think, and I have lots of understanding because I have all of the hats, wearing them at this point. They think that we can take the responsibility for the people that we invite to collaborate with us. And we accept, because we really want to do them. But the truth is that we are not. And we are not doing the things that we should do, at least legally, and we cannot protect the people that are working with us. So in terms of social security, when you have a performer, or a dancer, and what you're going to say, no, I don't want your money because I cannot provide enough for the people working for me? No, you struggle every time to provide more. And also as an independent curator, and I will stop there, I don't have a legal status in Greece. I have to be a freelancer or something, but I cannot afford the taxes. Even in France, when I was registered, I couldn't. And also, I didn't make enough money, so I had to do other things. So my personal practice is very scattered, is very fragmented. And many times I thought about quitting and not doing that. because I couldn't also provide for the artists working with me. But then you cannot stop yourself, because there's a few months that I have not done an exhibition and I feel like a junkie that doesn't have his drugs. I don't know if I answered anything or I just opened more questions.
Any question from...
Hello, my name is Emilia Boriti. I am a performance and visual artist. What I am listening here is the thoughts that the most of the people in the area of art we have. Although that we have this big vision to create art, it is so difficult in Greece, in front of crisis. It's not easy at all. And I think because we care about local communities and art and things like that, I find that it's not to convince local people. It's just to take time, although that the most of the times you are not paid at all, to spend time with the people and to trust you. Because I have spent a lot of time in Eleusis from 16 years old here. And there are local people and communities here that are not involved at all. And in front of 21, this big event, what I hear is that they are a little back because they don't find connections. They are not the artists with a big CV or the strong public relationships. So all these people are back. So it seems to me we have to really to see very clear about what is happening. Me as an artist, I have a responsibility to create relationships with my audience. But it's not easy at all, because as you said, you have to find money to live. You have spent a lot of money for studies, masters and things like that. And in Greece, it's not, because we have, I think, we have a strong will, but at the same time, everything is organized in front of relationships. Sometimes this is fine, it's very good. Sometimes you can see that if you are close with some people, you do work. If you are a little back, it's more difficult. So it seems to me that we have to start with new mentalities. We are the work that we are doing. We are the artwork that we are doing. And just to try to work with another ways. Listening audience, spending time with them, and just to continue and to be true with ourselves and with other people, and step by step. Thank you.
Somebody else has a question who wants to participate? No? So, regarding the structure, because the question is, okay, we understand that the artists spend a lot of time managing production, administration, and so on, and have less time for the research. And one of the answers may be to get a structure, an organization that will deal with all the administration. You travel, all of you, you travel, you go abroad, or you are from England. Do you know any good practice somewhere else that can be reproduced here in Greece, or could be an answer to these issues? You did, yes.
Okay. I come across a lot of organizations who come from practice. So artists who in Croatia, in Poland at the moment, we're working in Portugal and in the UK. And mostly it's artists who are frustrated when they leave university, and the only thing they can do is come together to try to find a solution. And most of these organizations, they have become NGOs. So the structure is different from the structure I'm hearing of yours. So conceptually, there is not a divide between the artist and the business. It's all part of one thing. So some have memberships where the artists are members, some are part of this family of artists. If you're working in a small town, the NGO becomes somehow the center of it. And I think because you have the NGO status, you're not seen as being the people who make money out of the artists, because conceptually you are part of the charitable process. So for me, and this is obviously my experience, this is the way forward, because this also enables you to creatively apply for European funding, apply for state funding, apply for foundation and that kind of structural funding, which has very strong rules about distribution, but actually the cultural curators, producers, managers, whatever we call ourselves, are on the same level as the artists, and there isn't a divide somewhere. So I don't understand enough about the business legal setup in Greece, but I would propose that if you can, an NGO structure is the way to go to create an equal space for artists, curators, and producers to work together.
What I would say is that it's a series of questions that are interrelated into that. So it's like, I mean, yes, in UK, for example, there are producers that when you can have a production company or a producer that takes care of all these practicalities in some ways, and you know, artists or a group can just do this and someone else deals with this, or you have someone. But the thing is, the solution is not there, because of course there is an arts council there that you apply for the grant and so on. And even there, from my experience at least, when you start, you do it yourself. You apply a few times yourself, and then you're in a status that you can book a tour, or you can find a series of companies that can support you, and so on and so on. So I think the question for me here would be, how do we think of infrastructures that can actually create different forms of support for the independent space? And I think in that, for example, some of the things that you actually put into the table, Eleni, I think they're really important to think, for example, also in this context of this conference, that says, okay, is it only the big capital? So it's what infrastructures can start that actually are open, to go back to something Amalia kind of mentioned before, that is like how, for example, there are structures outside of the centers and infrastructures that artists can, you know, be part, and like can be open calls, or can be ways that people know how to participate. Because at the moment, I don't know how people can take part, let's say, in residency, for example, in Crete, or in kind of in an artwork there. So how do we create kind of other forms of supporting that is not just money, or it's not just about solving the solution. So it's about, and that's a kind of ecology. It's about thinking this kind of ecology and landscape, for example. And that for me would be an answer to convincing in a few years' time or the mayor, because it's little seeds. It's little seeds that you cannot like expect the audience or the people that are not into this art world to be educated. But the moment there are infrastructures, these little infrastructures over a course of time actually produce a network. And I think that can really be kind of creative for the independent space. You know, there can be infrastructures inside the capital and outside somehow that can really support. And then, okay, this practicality that they can do the management, it's not the key issue. You know, there are people that can do it.
I'm so sorry, but in Greece and in Marseille, okay, when it comes to public funds, okay, very often, I think we all know that there is a secrecy, I don't know if it's the right word, about how it works. But we all have the same rights to public funds, okay? If you work, and working is a drive, like Eleni says, so often I think about quitting, but she won't quit. Because she has a drive to do what she does, and most of the artists I know have this drive, so you will continue to work. But sometimes you have to, like very recently I have these projects next year, and I was thinking, maybe for once I can ask some funds for this thing. And I called the Ministry of Culture out of nowhere, okay? And I'm like, hello, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, who are you? You're calling from Crete, you say? And I was like, yeah, but I'm going there. I want some help with this. And you bring them in front of their responsibility, even if they're gonna refuse. In Marseille, there was once, and we had a union for artists. This is very important. It doesn't exist. This union in the 70s went and built with bricks the door of the Ministry of Work so that we can get accident du travail, like social security for artists. Okay, we don't have this. We have something that is almost as if you are a homeless person in Greece. Okay, so in these responsibilities, the union would do other things. Like when I was pregnant, I called them. I said, I need help. They said, okay, we get the connection. They went to the equivalent of ΚΑΛΛΙΤΕΧΝΙΚΗ Επιμελητήριο in France, which is Maison des Artistes, and they went to them, and they did this for me, okay, because I was like 6 months pregnant, and I was like, oh, wait, I'm an artist. All this time I didn't care about Social Security, but now I do, okay? Or very important artists that I knew who were exhibiting everywhere, and all of a sudden, one, Gilles Barbier, who was sick all of a sudden, really seriously sick, and had never paid Social Security. They worked for him. But also, the local FRAC PACA, who was doing, it's like a public collection of contemporary art, and they were doing this secret purchase between them of art, and one of the people from the union found about it, and she called and she said, bring all your portfolios today to the FRAC. And we were like 50, taking our portfolios to say, we know about what you're doing. They still didn't buy anything from us, but we did it, okay? We brought them there, and in this collective thing is also, and in Greece too, you have rights. Last year we were organizing this street art festival with the municipality of Iraklio, and I was in the organizing committee. And around February, I go there and they say, okay, we're gonna post the projects on Facebook in a closed group, and we're gonna vote between us which ones we want to have. I'm like, can I start telling you what's wrong with this? So the one who has the most friends will be in the festival. I said, I don't like being friendly to people, but I might be a very good artist. And I know many artists who don't like, you know, engaging socially, but they're good artists. So I said, you are managing, and this was sitting with the mayor and the deputy mayor in cultural affairs. And I said, you're managing public funds. And it's easier to do it in Irakli, obviously, because it's a very small city. I said, you're managing public funds. You can't do it. You have to do a committee. And I shamed them really seriously into bringing in a committee with people who are in the art world, like real curators, you know, and real museum directors who work also, you know, in this field for many years, and who could say very easily, this is good, this is not good, this. And I assure you, we didn't even have enough proposals to cover. We had money, we had more money, and we couldn't get enough proposals in. And all the time, I was scared, oh my God, all these artists are gonna come from abroad to Iraklio, and then they're gonna be like disappointed by what they will find. But it worked fine for what it was. Okay? But our responsibility, and this is like a war Okay, it's really, as far as it concerns managing the public funding, but it has to be fuel, okay, as well, as hard as it is for everyone.
Oh, then there is a union in Greece. No, there's no union. No, there are any net artist union. Okay.
There is something equivalent for visual artists, καλλιτεχνικό επιμελητήριο. It's not a union, but it's a... Yes, it's social security because it's the only thing that you can do actually with that. Not judging, because I'm not part of this. I couldn't be part of this as a curator because I didn't do my studies here. And also because it seems as a very conservative structure that when we did the open call, because we did an open call for initiator, they immediately shamed us with things that were not even true. And it's no judge, again, but it's very far away, their aesthetics and the way that they function from what is contemporary art today. So you don't have the way to get in. And it's also very much linked with some political parties in Greece. And, well, it makes it harder if you don't have a political agenda.
See them. I went to see καλλιτεχνικό επιμελητήριο when my second son was born, and I was no longer in France, I was here. And in France, I told you, I spoke with the union, they spoke with them, I got maternity leave, queen. Okay. Then I come here, I go to see καλλιτεχνικό επιμελητήριο, and they say, yes, you can apply, you know, it goes through a jury, which is all fine. But, I mean, even listening to them, they were like, are you doing etching? Are you doing sculpture? I'm like, wait, you know, that's how you judge us? And still, they provide very bad social security. So I didn't go to them. I created a business form, which is wrong, but so that my kids could have social security, because it was like pronia. Okay, pronia is the minimum social security you can have. In France, Maison des Artistes. Okay, Maison des Artistes is the equivalent for France, is social security and retirement plan for artists. They also do cooperation with the tax office. So they do a journée de formation, where they bring in every city and every big city, they bring people from the tax office to form us into what we should, how we should do our business, how we can do our own tax, and everything about what we can request. And even this year, they had to give some money back. And there was an artist who shared this. It was about one of the taxes changed the percentage, and they had to give back some money to all the artists, but you had to find the secret thing on their site and apply, and we did it. Both Vincent and I, we both got it. And somebody just shared it on Facebook. An artist said, go there, there is this thing you have to apply. So, but they work with the artists. They really try to get all the artists covered and get us like to have you know, access to museums for free, for example. Like we go to most of the museums in France that are state funded. You can get in for free with the card of the Maison des Artistes.
I have another thought. Because it seems like for all these years we've been going to different seminars and talks and discussions, and to me what seems to be missing always is maybe someone, maybe Eleni, you can tell that to the organizers of Eleusis, there should be a seminar that has to do only with legal and financial stuff for artists and cultural managers, because I think it's something that's always missing from all this.
From our lawyers?
Maybe, or, you know, I mean, you can invite, or someone can organize something that invite lawyers, because there are such lawyers who have also been in cultural management studies or work with, within this field. and also logistes, yes, accountants that know these aspects as well for culture and outside culture. So maybe if the state cannot provide this kind of help and guidance and consulting for artists and managers, some other organization could. So perhaps next time we all meet here, it's to discuss, part of the discussion should be only based on this.
I think that's great, and generally that's how things have worked in Greece, like this kind of infrastructures that are based on like what kind of Aspasia said before, of like, okay, I'll ask some friends and my friends will help. And it's like how if we institutionalize that somehow, and because it's like, it's not only legal people and lawyers, because I think all people that have been in the field for a number of years have so much valuable knowledge around those issues, and it's issues that everyone has encountered. So the moment there would be a collective body that actually could come together at certain times, I think there would also be a place that you could exchange knowledge about legal issues, about tax issues, about a connection with abroad, and like, you know, because people do have this knowledge, and some people are producers, and of course it's really good to always seek the advice from the experts, but I think there are also knowledge from like bottom up somehow. And I would say into that, like going back, that in Greece we do have some union structures that are like the one you mentioned, but also there's one for like actors, for example, or dancers that's so old-fashioned that they never really like somehow followed the changing conditions of artistic production. In this way, they were like, for example, the union of actors were almost, how to say, against the little groups, because they were actually imposing this kind of formal union rights, and then there were little groups that had no money, and it's like people were kind of scared of them. And then there were also attempts of like theater groups coming together and forming another one. But of course we need to really kind of put it into Greece and think that Greece, I think it kind of any state structure for arts is around 79, 80. Like that we actually start really thinking that this is something kind of we need. And then and that's also fragmented with all its problems. It fails to follow contemporary production a lot and what is happening really in the field. And then we have the crisis. And then everything is teared apart in every field. So it's actually, there are no rights for the unions that had already rights. So, you know, perhaps it is a moment of like simply like creating now the structures like that and seeing, you know, it is the moment of getting together again and seeing what is this landscape now, because there were attempts, a lot of attempts. In 2010 again, you know, it's like sometimes organized, but, you know, in some ways, those little moments, things like that, I don't know if it would be like possibly if like these little fragments in the field haven't happened. I think if we need to think of the future, we need to actually, perhaps that would be something that we can think through this, is like how a kind of forum, a meeting for independent space that brings both cultural producers and actually discusses issues that are urgent from the field, from bottom up. It could be an annual meeting or...
No, I just want to say that, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying, but at the same time, I wonder whether it would also be nice, that's an understatement, if we didn't have to always go after the new rules, the new legislations, because they're changing, and lawyers and accountants are not always up to date. I mean, you have to find the one that is, or you have to educate them yourself. I mean, I have a friend she's a dramaturg and also a lawyer for artists in Berlin, Germany. And we were discussing, and she was like, no, in Berlin you don't have to have such a complicated structure when you're starting out, because that's not logical. So, I mean, we also have to demand for, I mean, I asked the ministry, when applying, I had to ask the ministry certain questions, and of course there was this very nice lady, there is always one, or one, okay, but she didn't have answers for anything, for everything, and I mean, there were things that they had asked us to give them, so it's it's a bit funny. I mean, if they don't know what they're asking in terms of budget or in terms of, I mean, it's their application. They created it. Yes. And she was like, how should I know? And I was like, I don't know. And of course, I held my tongue and I didn't say, how am I supposed to know then? But so it's also, I mean, yes, we should exchange information, but at the same time, we should refuse to become experts at something that is constantly changing, and it's illogical. I mean, we should also ask that it's less complicated, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't say that we need to become experts, but I'd said more of really exchange where we are, and I think that's also perhaps in kind of forming collective demands. That's the only way you can actually have any power. Otherwise, you can have to band your tack always and ask for another expert, which again might not be. So it's only the way to actually ask you know, create collective forums. That's the only way.
Yeah, because knowledge is not everything. I mean, collective forums allow you to, demand things. Yeah, we agree.
And collectively, and share what is common, you know.
A year ago, or a little bit more, I was working for Documenta as a curatorial assistant. In the beginning, I was thinking that it would be more a theoretical thing. I would have the time to accompany the artists in the research, but lots of my time was spent to find out how I can hire them or pay them. Because Documenta is registered in Germany and they didn't have a tax account in Greece. So they couldn't do that. And also their lawyers and accountants were no expert in Greek law, and they didn't want to be. They refused them to be. I spent lots of time with the administration in order to, you know, find a solution collectively. That was impossible. Yes, or unlearning. They learned something from Greece. So what I did, because I had mostly dancers or performers that they could hire physically, and that was very important to take care of them, I worked with smaller companies, some non-profit, some enterprise, some production companies, that they had great accounting system, so they had really good advice for the people that are working for us, the performers, but also for us, and lawyers. In Eleusis, because we're a municipal anonymous company, we have to commission somebody else to do what we could do, actually. So we were working with Delta P, and they had like great contracts. Okay, the curators have read them. The artists, when they're young, they don't read them, but that's another story. Now I have contracts that I know that they're very good protecting both the organization and the artists. So it's like a pool of information that is getting there. But mainly what these companies gave, because we have an accounting department, but you imagine how many things two people have to do? We're understaffed, that's for sure. They give their time also to both artists and myself. And just to say this, because we talked a lot about financing the artists and money, it's not only that a friendly environment. What I realized is that from the artists that they wanted people on the ground. We had one project coordinator for 6 artists. They were all very ambitious, more ambitious than we expected. So they needed people on the ground to see them, because we had a back office, let's say. The project coordinator was holding the information. He would give it to me, he would give it to the production company, but they needed to see the people with their own eyes, have them there. That was very important for them. And then it was also hospitality. Hospitality, it's a big thing for artists, especially when they come from abroad. It's not only their contract, but it's like the accommodation that you provide for them. There's some artists that come from contemporary circus or, I don't know, a theater, but visual artists, they need their room, they need their bed. Otherwise, they're getting really crazy. They need internet constantly. They cannot live without that. And that's normal to say, but it's not easy if you don't have infrastructure and you try to create this. So we are really trying it, and it will take time, but another thing is that we don't have time. In 3 years, we're going to cease to exist. And Documenta had the same thing. Every Documenta has different staff, different artistic director, technical director, different crew. And there's not a manual that they gave to us afterwards. I was thinking that I'm going to work for a big organization. That's my thing, that's my time. No, but we had to do everything from the beginning. So what else? And also something that I realized when, for your residency, Muriel, with Anne-Laure Franchette, this French artist living in Switzerland, they need a dialogue to be with somebody in dialogue. An artist has to be in dialogue with somebody. So either it's the curator or somebody else, but it's more than money, what I'm trying to say. We are struggling for money, we know the situation, but it's very much based on human contact and also intellectual. An artist needs a person who has references, knowledge, give guidance, advice. Guidance is so important for an artist after a fine art school. That's why probably you did so many collaborative projects. You tried to restructure, to reactivate the form of the school. And one last thing, you may know better, Irini, it's wages. This platform in the United States, it's like a platform for artists that they can claim money and protection when they work with public institutions. Because that's a big question, how you pay artists, what's their fee? Maybe in theater or in other practices, it's about the time that they may spend, but I cannot ask for a painter how much time you spend on your painting. If I ask my partner who spends maybe like 1 minute in his painting, he will go crazy. How much time did you spend there? And all the day that he's looking at something or reading or whatever, isn't this a time that should be paid? So wages, it's based more on the financial situation of the institution. Because it's not easy to ask for an artist-run space, money. They don't have them, they cannot give them to you, they don't make money. But a public institution, and that creates some form of equality, and it's a good also compass for an institution to know how much it should pay the artists.
In what concerns wages, in three different, first of all, in the United States, you just say, that's how much I want. And you have to know how much you want to ask for, okay? In France, there is a state fee. It's established how much you should be paid per hour. And if you are hired to work like in a residence, if you are in a residence in a school, for example, this is state funded by the region, in general, you're paid that money, no matter who you are and how early or late in your career you are. In Greece, it's a shame to ask for your wages. Okay, when you go to the region, I went to the region to ask for wages for a project. It had, the budget had everything, and the per diems. They were like, what? We're gonna pay the artists? Last year in the festival, and I apologize to the technical crew here, but the technical crew was paid much more than the artists, okay? And I said, and it was not, it didn't necessarily go to the actual technicians, of course, but I was sitting in the organizing committee and I was hearing how much they were paying for the TV spot. And I was like, are you serious? You already have the audience of Irakli. You don't need a TV spot. They're all gonna come. It's in the streets. You need to bring artists. They pay them 400 euros. From the 400 euros, the Greeks, like me, had to give you know how much in tax, okay? And I was the only person, because I was in the organizing committee, because all the invoices went through me to be paid. Some people couldn't make invoices, so we had to find ways to pay them. The ones who could make invoices, forget about it. It was like they wanted my grandmother's death certificate, okay? I had to give them, and I said, why are you asking me all this? Because I saw how much you requested from the other artists. Oh, because you're the Greek one, okay? And, but wages are something that we have to ask for, no matter if they want to give them or not, you know? And when we go to the region and we invite artists, I feel responsible that they have to be paid, and I have to go and I have to tell them, even if they're not gonna give them, that they have to pay, okay? And the person who's gonna curate and the artist.
We have, it's a constant issue, the payment of artists, particularly in exhibitions where you're not producing a thing in the same way and you might get an exhibition payment right, but this is at a very low level. We've had recently, in the last 2 years in the UK, we have had a paying artist campaign, which has produced two quite interesting guidelines to what you should pay people. So, I mean, I can maybe send you the links, Eleni. One is the artist newsletter, which has a membership of 23,000 artists in the UK, and the other is the Artists Union, which is quite a new space in the UK, and it calculates what you should be paid for preparation, what you should be paid for exhibition, what you should be paid for education. So although the amounts will differ in different countries, as a structure it's quite useful to look at and to use as an advocacy tool to increase the way that artists are paid.
More and more, I think, also in Greece, it's not there yet, but it's coming. We'll all have to cover ourselves legally. Okay? Every public installation I do in the States, I have to buy myself insurance that covers all the employees of the city and all the public, all the people that are going to visit the park, so that nobody can sue the city of New York, the city of Newark, the city of Baltimore, if my sculpture, let's say, falls on someone. And yesterday in the discussion I had at the Ministry of Culture, we talked about it. So it's something to take into account, legal coverage and insurance.
Because we were speaking about wages before, in France there's a network, it's called Art en Résidence, and they provide full legal contracts and also the fees for the artists. It's something that I learned recently from a French creator that we had here, Anne Langlois, and it has a pool of information that you can take and you can, adapt to your own country and your own network.
There's also a network for residencies. I just thought about it yesterday, which is called Res Artis, and I know there is even more than that, but I met the Bulgarian representative, I don't know what she's called, in New York, and we were doing a project together, and she wanted to apply through this project to come to Greece, and she says, oh, we don't have anybody in Greece in the network. But that's what she told me. So go ahead.
I'm a very recent board member of Res Artis, and I met a member last night at dinner in Kavala. So that was
2 years ago.
At least one there is.
Yesterday at our working session, so we're going to find more.
Okay, questions, or should we resume what?
Are there any questions?
And yeah.
Don't be afraid.
No.
We're very nice.
So since we have to make like a note, we have to make like a quick report on of the session. What is the main proposal that we have to submit to the organization, Elefsina? Yes, yes.
We touched on Res Artis. Also for the theatre, there is IETM, so circulating information about the European international networks that anyone is able to join might be a way to increase your visibility, but also to understand how practice is happening.
And the main word that was repeated many times, it's collaboration and networking. This is what I think that was the most came often in the conversation. So I think that if we have finished, then we can close the session, working session, and have a nice afternoon. Thank you.